that's the most important thing that we're trying to achieve here. We're feeding the soil. We're growing soil, not plants. All right? The soil is the key to all of this. Then it makes all of our lives so much easier when it comes to the pest management and prevention and things like this. Okay? Last time we spoke about living soil systems and how we're kind of trying to mimic the forest floor that we see out here in the natural cycles of nature. How we might have leaves falling from the trees, we might have our animal droppings, insects dying, things like this, and all falling on the floor there that then is feeding our soil. We've got our microbes and our worms and everything pulling that down into the soil, building up the nutrition in there, and then therefore feeding the plants and creating that nice cycle. Okay, so that was kind of what we were speaking about last time, and we didn't really touch too much on pest management and pest control. And I know that pest control is something that we all struggle with, you know, just hearing about your silver beet, was it? Yeah, silver beet. So we have so many pests and so many different things that we're trying to battle in the garden to grow something, whether it's, you know, primarily vegetables that they might be going for, or our fruit trees, or, you know, all sorts of different things. So pest management is something I thought would be a really cool topic to kind of dive into. And hopefully this approach might be something slightly different to what you're used to hearing. More often we're hearing about dealing with certain pests with certain solutions. So it might be use this spray for this bug, wrap your things in netting to prevent it from this, etc., etc., etc. And these things become very, very difficult to understand. They become a huge workload in our garden. It's something we're having to battle with all the time. And I think the main thing about integrated pest management is the fact that it is integrated into something that we're doing anyway, and it is a byproduct, a result, or a symptom of what we're doing to then therefore have natural pest control, okay? This all comes from the idea that we're trying to avoid our synthetic chemicals, anything that is not natural in our gardens. We want to have completely organic, hopefully, gardens and food, because as we know, the healthier our soil is, the healthier our plants are. In turn, the healthier we are as well. So a little bit of backstory. See if I can get this thing to work. There we go. I was clicking the wrong way. So a little bit about myself. Okay, last year, you may have remembered I was with Steve. Okay, Steve was my partner in crime starting this whole business. We started from the idea of trying to develop healthy food. Steve has Parkinson's disease, and part of managing Parkinson's disease is to really hone in on your health and your nutrition. And that became something that was quite a focus for us, trying to really get him to a point where he could, live life to the fullest. So that's where we developed our two products, or the two kind of flagship products of the Shed Organics. Now, initially we started that to share the products and make it more available and easier for people to access organic gardening, high quality amendments, seed mixes, things like this, okay? And back then it was kind of, let's just try and help people out, let's share it to our local community and see where it ends up. Now, me being me and being hold on to it, got a little bit of a gust of wind. As myself being super passionate about these subjects and wanting to really run with everything, I kind of pushed on and sort of made myself the face of it, filmed everything, spoke to everybody, volunteered for every talk. And if you know anybody with Parkinson's disease, that is quite hard to do, going and speaking and being in front of people and feeling confident that you can actually get your body to work and do the things that you want to do. So understandably, Steve took a back seat and started to focus more on his health and let me sort of run wild with all of this kind of stuff. So since last year, I've launched a podcast. which we had wonderful Tim on as a guest, so I highly encourage you to go and listen to us yap on about a whole bunch of stuff. So that was super fun. But I've had some wonderful guests on, and I continue to every single week. So it's really, really fun for me to chat and pick people's brains. So I highly encourage you to go and check out the Shed Organics show, very unoriginally named, but please go and check it out. It is wonderful to hear some of those conversations. Also, I'm a husband and father-to-be. We have our first child due in a matter of days or weeks. So if my phone goes off, okay, I'm out of here. But so it's very, very exciting. And I think something that this new chapter is bringing into my life is, for those of you who have kids, is focusing on the next generation and how do we teach and educate about nature's cycles? How do we get them inspired to be in the garden with us and, you know, get that enthusiasm for looking after the earth and the health of our soils? So that's something that's really, really prevalent for me right now, obviously. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to kind of jump headfirst into that chapter. Cool. So let's go through a little bit about what we're going to learn. Okay. So we're going to do what integrated pest management generally means. Obviously, pest management is fairly straightforward, but the integrated side of it and the ability to kind of let nature do the work for us, I guess, is something that we want to lean into a little bit more today. So that's how we're preventing pests naturally, and there's a few different ways we can control that. Effective, safe organic treatments, okay? Some things aren't so good, some things are. I've got a few different things in here to suggest to you, and then we're talking real-world examples as well, okay? So I've heard one about a scrub turkey and some other things, but what else are we dealing with in the garden at the moment? Has anyone got a bit of a pest problem that they're dealing with? What have we got? Possums, yes, me too. I have this one possum that we have this thing going on, and it's ruining all of my experiments. But anyone else, anything with... Yes, and aphids, yeah. Oh, I know, grasshoppers are crazy, and we're nearly into caterpillar season, I guess, as well. You're seeing some of our beautiful elephant's ears and things being devoured at the moment. So plenty of problems, right? And often we do think of it like this. We're going, oh, there's lots of aphids, or oh, there's lots of this and that and the other, okay? But the way that we're going to be talking about it today in terms of a holistic approach is that we're going to have pests in our garden. We just want manageable populations, okay? And in nature, we have a whole bunch of cycles. We have some things that eat other things, and then some things that rely heavily on populations of certain things. For example, ladybugs and aphids, okay? Ladybugs come in and they will eat our aphids for us. But if there's no aphids in the garden, you're not going to have a huge population of ladybugs. So there's this kind of tit-for-tat relationship that we like to encourage in the garden. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, okay? So IPM, you can read the definition here. A sustainable science-based approach to managing pests that reduces chemical use and emphasizes prevention, monitoring, and control, okay? It's important because we don't want those synthetic pesticides. We're trying to build long-term soil health and plant resilience. And we're protecting, as I said before, the beneficial insects that we can have and our pollinators, our bees and things like that come into the garden and can do some helpful work for us. Okay, now that last point there, supporting a balanced ecosystem rather than creating pest problem cycles. So you'll hear me talk about diversity a lot today, and you'll hear me talk about maybe ecosystems and being in balance as well. Okay, this is crucially important to these topics, and it'll help us understand a little bit more about it. What I wanted to share with you is a book that I've started reading again. Okay, has anyone seen this book before? It's called Tuning Into Nature. Tuning Into Nature by Philip Callahan. Okay, really, really awesome resource. Okay, I highly encourage you to do it. Now, I'm just going to read you, okay, a little excerpt from this. Okay, so this book was written in the 70s, okay? I think maybe 74, 75, and he redid a sort of intro about the book in the year 2000. So that's another 25 years ago, all right? This is the 25-year anniversary edition in the year 2000. So it's a 50-year-old book, okay? Now listen to what he said, okay? Early in my career, I studied pesticides, as did all entomologists. But the findings I release in this book, Tuning into Nature, taught me that attempting to poison insects was at a cross purpose to nature and would, in the end, prove futile. Now, 25 years later, remember, in the year 2000, worldwide pesticide use is at an all-time high. Do we think it's gone up or down since then? Crops lost to insect damage are also at an all-time high. A sick plant actually sends forth a beacon carried in the infrared, attracting insects. It is then the insect's role to dispose of this plant, deemed unfit for life by nature. By learning how to tune into nature, we can better understand God's beautiful design and come to work with nature by enhancing her energies rather than attempting to overpower and rule over her. Okay? Very, very pertinent part there. So I encourage you to take a photo of this afterwards and go and look that up. Really awesome book. So what he's referring to there, okay, is that a lot of our pests that we find in the garden actually have a purpose and a role in nature. Okay, we have a lot of composition in our gardens. Okay, we're composing plants, I guess. Okay, we're making things. But then we also have the opposite to complete that cycle, the decomposers. That's where our fungus comes in, okay? And that's also where our pests come in. Their job is to come in and get rid of the stuff that's there. And the important part to realize there is that it's a sick and unhealthy plant, okay? Now, there's been some experiments done where they'll have one row of, let's just use silver beet because I've got that beautiful example. One row of silver beet here in a garden bed that has thriving, healthy soil, okay? And then next to it, they have another row that is in not so healthy soil at all, okay? And it's not really hard to guess which one was attacked, all right? In fact, the one that was completely in this nice, healthy soil was untouched. And you'd think, hang on, they're right next to each other, they're the same crop, why do they not just jump across and eat that one? And we need to think about that as to why that is important, okay? And due to what Philip says in the book, okay, unhealthy plants that are signaling to nature that they're not either in the right season, they're not getting the right nutrients, they don't have sufficient plant resilience with our microbes, our bacteria and fungus all underneath the soil, okay? The symbiotic relationship that the soil has been broken down, and it's going, I'm not healthy, I'm not doing so well, and it signals for those guys to come in, bang, take it away, okay? We often have really healthy gardens. You might see some people who have these beautiful, thriving gardens, especially on YouTube and Instagram and things, and you go, how do these guys have incredible gardens? And I'm getting smashed, you know, and they might even be in the same local area. But the difference is not in the fact that there's pests around. They don't just come in and go, oh, okay, there's some over there, and tell each other and bring them all in, okay? They're seeing these signals that are being sent off, as Philip says, in the infrared, okay? Now, I won't go into too much of the science behind it because, to be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it as well, okay? But what we're going to talk about today is things that we can do to best make sure that our soil is as healthy as it can be, and our crops are therefore as healthy as they can be, and therefore it minimizes the pest pressure and minimizes the amount of things that we need to do as a result. Make sense? Cool. Let me go one more. All right. There we go. Okay. So this is our IPM pyramid. All right. Now, if you read the little bit on the side, you'll notice that it's to do with lawns. And lawns aren't my favorite thing in the world. I just really liked how it was kind of alongside the side of the pyramid. So I left it, okay? But this is giving us an idea of the stages, kind of like the food pyramid, but that's not a great example because the food pyramid is very wrong. But the way that this works is that we have certain levels that we're going to work up before we get to the top one up there, which is our intervention, okay, where we come in with a spray or some sort of remedy to our bugs, okay? So down the bottom, we're moving from prevention up to intervention, okay? So we're going to start with our cultural controls. Cultural controls are where we're basically going in to try and do some of this work that Philip's talking about in the book, where we're trying to develop healthy soil first and foremost, and some of the things that we can do first before pests arrive and those signals get sent out, okay? Healthy soil, healthy plants, fewer pests, okay? We've touched on that already. Now, some of the things that we want to be doing as a cultural control, as you can see, are having soil microbes and worms. Microbes are the key to everything. We're hearing more and more about our gut microbiome, okay, and having a diverse diet, I guess, as well. We're also talking if you've got our cattle that are eating our meat and everything as well. They're showing that, you see a lot of people talking about grass-fed versus grain-fed meat at the moment, okay? Truth is, realistically, there's not a huge amount of difference between a grass-fed and a grain-fed animal. But what does make a huge significant difference is the diversity of crops that those cattle were grazing in the pasture. So if they have diverse and local plants that they are going around grazing, they have a much richer microbiome and therefore are much healthier, and that translates into the meat. This goes exactly the same for our plants, for all of the plants and vegetables that we eat. If we have a wide range of diverse microbes in the soil, bacteria, that's going to allow a rich buffet for these plants to access in the soil, and therefore they're going to have the most bang for their buck for our health when we're eating them, okay? So that's when we're talking about soil microbes, and I might touch on that again soon. So the next thing, fungal activity, okay? I'm reading another amazing book at the moment. I'm just reading so many books all the time. This one's by Paul Stamets. Anyone heard of Paul Stamets? Beautiful. Another man to look up. He is a magic man when it comes to mushrooms. Okay, not magic mushrooms necessarily. There was a little bit of a pun there. But he does some wonderful work explaining the networks of fungal relationships underneath our soil. Okay. Something that I do quite regularly is use a mycorrhizal fungi mix. Anyone heard of this before or used this? Okay, another thing to look up. You can obviously, this is all being recorded, so if you want to go back down and go, what was he talking about at the start? We can go back and have a look. But mycorrhizal fungi, right? It's the fungus that is around the root zone in the soil. It's the one that communicates with our roots to basically exchange things that each other need. It's also the communication network. So underneath all of these plants here, where we have all of our trees and everything, we've got roots going absolutely everywhere. As above, so below, right? So all of the beautiful trees we see, there is probably a much bigger network happening under the ground. They're all connected by the fungus, all of these networks of communication. You might have often heard about how if you have a row of trees, okay? This has been shown in places like Africa or something where you've got, a set of trees, and then you've got these wild safari-like animals, your giraffes, your zebras, things like this, coming in and eating some of the plants, right? But it happens everywhere. If one of the trees on the end of the row starts getting attacked or starts getting eaten, what it does is it sends out signals both through things in the air and things in the soil, just to make it really simple. And it communicates through these networks. And what happens is that plant realizes, tells all its mates through this relationship underneath the soil, and all of the other trees and plants that are down the row start emitting this same repellent, a smell, a taste, a chemical compound in the leaves that will prevent them from being eaten, okay? This also happens with sharing resources, nutrition, okay? This is very densely packed, and no one's coming along and fertilizing it, are they? Okay? In fact, they're probably coming along and spraying it. And it's still doing really well because they're sharing resources. They're sharing sunlight, okay? They're communicating between each other. I need this, I need that, I need a little bit more water, I can share it from you, etc., etc. And that's mainly down to our fungal relationships in the soil. So fungus is a massive one that we want to have in our soil. And if you're seeing it, that's a really, really good sign. Dealing with a little bit of wind here. It's like my skirt's blowing up a bit. All right, compost, okay, organic matter. We spoke a little bit about all the organic matter dropping on the top here. Everyone's composting in some form at home, yes? Great, okay, we're turning all of our organic matter into beautiful, rich compost. And again, diversity, okay, this is where it's coming in. Diversity is key in our compost. A whole range of different ingredients makes the most rich, nutrient-rich and nutrient-dense compost to be throwing back on our soil, okay? There's a whole bunch of range of composting. We don't really need to go into that too much at the moment. One of my absolute favorites is bokashi composting, if anyone's done that as well. Really, really interesting technique and provides this gorgeous liquid that you can also put in, which is amazing for our plants. So another one to look up, giving you lots of little things to look up. So yeah, composting, that's quite obvious how we're fertilizing back our soil, okay? Mulching. Mulch, okay, is another big one, especially during our summers. Things like this where we're losing moisture and the soil's drying out. It's losing all of the ability for it to communicate and basically form all of these things under the soil. If you don't have mulch as well, if you have some nice bare soil, nature is going to fill it up with weeds, okay? So either we have our soil covered by our ground covers or just general density of plants, or we're using mulch, okay? Now, just quickly diverting into the cover crop mix that we've created, okay? There's a few samples here for a few lucky people that may not have got one last time, but I'm very low on samples, been talking a lot lately. But the cover crops are a really good way of creating organic matter, again, diverse organic matter. That's why we've got 15 different seeds in there. Okay, they all serve a different purpose. Cover crop is maybe another one for another day. I do have some videos on YouTube that go into cover crop as well, so you can go and have a look at those. But the mix itself allows for organic matter to be built up. Okay, it's going to grow up in all of this, like this, and basically fill the gaps where nature would normally put weeds down. And then the best technique is to come along and chop it just above the soil and drop it. So we may have heard of chop and drop before, okay? That's just taking organic matter and putting it straight back down on the soil to feed the soil. That becomes a mulch, all right? It can also be used as a living mulch. So at the moment, I've got, I'm still trying to push on with eggplants just to show people that you can really try and keep something going out of season a little bit if you have amazing soil. We'll see how well that works. At the moment, it's doing really good. But I've got this beautiful eggplant in a sort of maybe 50, 60 liter grow bag, okay? And underneath it is all of these little shoots and clover, okay? We've got snow peas now coming up because it's cooled down a little bit. We've got vetch, things like that. And some of your grasses as well. And what that's doing is creating this living mulch underneath that also helps to bring things down into the soil and feed it. And also I can keep chopping it and feeding it back to the soil. So it becomes this living mulch. We've also got diversity in there as well. So it means that everything is working exactly how we'd like it to. So cover crop, I won't go too much more into it, but that's something that we can use as well, a living mulch, okay? In terms of what mulches to use, all right, there's so many different mulches out there. Again, I'm going to talk about diversity, all right? If every single year you're using the exact same type of mulch, what's going to happen? We're going to build up the exact same nutrients and breakdown and et cetera, okay? So something I suggest is picking 3 or 4 different mulches and rotating between them, okay? One that I really like is something like barley straw. Lucerne is a really, really good one. But for the most part, I'm trying to chop and drop diverse things. So when you're done for the season, You're chopping things down, even, you know, when our corn finished, bang, 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 chop it up into pieces. We've got banana pups that we're chopping and dropping back onto the soil, a whole bunch of different things. One thing I will mention that a lot of people do use is sugarcane mulch, all right? Now, I'm not sure if you've found this, but a lot of people have, is that sugarcane mulch can be extremely hydrophobic, which means that it rejects water. So you can be standing there watering this garden bed for a good 20 minutes and then peel apart the top layer and it's bone dry, okay? Which is really frustrating. It also means that our soil is just not getting any of that moisture. Who knows where it's going, to be honest. I don't know how it manages to get rid of all of that water, but something to be really, really careful about. So if you are using sugarcane mulch, I would either mix it up with a different type of mulch, so you've got a bit of other things, or a super thin layer. But for the most part, I'm going to suggest try and steer clear of our sugarcane mulch. Even though it's so readily available here in this country, it's just something that just doesn't seem to work so well, okay? So that's just one thing to note. But that's mulching, okay? Cover crops we already touched on. And then the other thing is organic amendments, okay? That's where the number 1 blend comes in here, okay? Without going too much into that as well, I've talked people's ears off about that product as well. But again, diverse ingredients. We've got 15 different organic amendments, which are designed to break down in the soil through the microbes, bacteria, the worms, and feed our soil this complete, balanced buffet of nutrition, okay? You can come up, have a look at the bag as well, see all the ingredients that are on there, and you may have heard of some, you may have not heard of some, okay? But yeah, another really good one to use. Things like our rock dusts, our minerals that come from that, often forgotten. And then obviously kind of our organic matter, or a lot of our things that come from the sea as well. Kelp, fish, okay? Crustaceans as well. So a little bit stinky, but you know, it does wonders for our plants. Cool, moving along. Companion and trap planting, okay? Now, the first one here, companion planting, I mean, yes, it can work. Yes, there are relationships that do benefit each other in the soil. We were just talking about how I've got an eggplant and I've got my cover crop growing, which has clover in it. Clover is a nitrogen fixer, okay? Often as well, we use things like our Three Sisters method, where we have corn and we have beans or snow peas or something like this. So the nitrogen fixing from our beans and our snow peas brings the nitrogen into the soil and allows our corn, which is a heavy feeder, to have some of that nutrition straight away, okay? So there are relationships that do work, but there are so many other things that we can do that are much, much better than focusing on which plant to plant with what and which one doesn't like being planted with what. If we have a nice big soil battery, a buffet of everything that plants need, they'll be just fine. You know, they'll be absolutely fine. They're not just going, oh, there's a basil down there. I don't like him. I'm not going to work well with him, so I'm not going to grow very well. It just doesn't work like that, okay? Nature is so resilient. So if you have everything it needs, then nobody's going to be complaining, okay? The other one is trap planting, okay? Trap planting can be quite useful. You may have remembered at the start I was talking about how with our aphids and our ladybugs, to have a certain population of these pests is important. So having some aphids in your garden to attract these ladybugs and things that will eat it is important, okay? So you'll see that we've got nasturtiums here. Okay, nasturtiums are, I guess, a really good trap plant. They're also really good for our flowers. You can eat it, etc., etc. Love nasturtium. But it can be used to draw and attract some of the pests to it. You can kind of just leave it. It self-seeds. It's just going to keep coming up. And it's going to send out these signals that say, hey, maybe I'm a little bit more delicious than the food we've got growing over here, okay? So that's something you can use and can be used quite effectively, especially when we're working up to building this balanced ecosystem. You're not just going to have everything you need straight away, are we? You know, we really need to work on building this over time, and it does take time. But using these types of, I guess, relationships and things are quite important. So can anyone think of any companions or traps that are not mentioned here that you've tried or used?
You can plant a broccoli next to all your cabbages, because anything that's going to eat cabbages will 100% favour the broccoli.
Yes, exactly. So that's a really good example of using a trap or just like a lure and saying, hey, like there's something a little bit more delicious here that you can come and grab. So that's a really, really good example. Any others we can think of?
Calendula and Elysium together.
Yes, I've heard of that one too. Okay, haven't tried it myself,
I
but
tried it last year around all my cabbages,
yes,
and it really worked.
awesome.
Yeah, so I think last time we had the garden share at my place, that's when I tried it, and that was the biggest crop of cabbages I've ever had. So
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So in between the cabbage was the Elysium and Calendula.
Yes,
And it's actually come up again this year, self-seeded back up again. In the
gorgeous.
same garden, so that's pretty cool.
That's wonderful. That's really, really cool. So there are these relationships that do work, okay? But what I want to stress, we're going to talk about it a little bit more in a second, is that we're kind of confusing our pests, all right? We're using scents, colors, and all of these types of things to confuse our pests, to kind of go, so they don't come in and see this, we'll go through it in a second, but this full garden bed of just one crop that's just going, hello, eat me, you know? So we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, okay? Another thing we can do for our cultural controls is our crop rotation, okay? And plant diversity. Now, rotation refers to if we've got maybe not the most optimum soil battery or buffet for our plants, okay? So if we're working with a rotation of crops in, say you've got a raised garden bed, okay? One season or one round you might be planting, as it says here, our legumes, beans, peas, lentils, things like this, okay? And then the next one goes into our root crops, all right? Then the next one goes into our fruiting crops. And then we go back to our brassicas and our leafy veg, okay? Now this cycle creates a little bit of a shared relationship, excuse me. So when we've got a buffet of something that say our corn, okay, it will completely deplete our soil of a lot of our nutrients. You then want to be putting something in after that corn that's not corn again, okay? Because we're going to keep stealing all of these nutrients. Remember though, that this is based on small scale, and if we don't have an enormous, like, you know, if we're not planting in the ground where we've just got this huge amount of soil, okay? We spoke about as above, so below earlier. So if you've got a plant that has a pot this big and the canopy's this big, the biology in the soil cannot keep up with that plant, okay? So we've got the breakdown of all of our nutrients, we're putting compost in and things like this, but there's no space, there's nothing for the biology to be able to break all of this down and feed the plant in enough time for that plant to want to grow. So we really have to be mindful that the canopy size represents the root size. So if we're planting in the ground, if we're planting right out here, okay, you could have an enormous tree and it would still be fine. Okay, so this is why our forests work really well. This is why planting in the ground works really well. But I'm very aware that not all of us have acreage, not all of us have the ability to be planting in huge areas. We've got pots, we want to have something on the windowsill or just outside the kitchen that you can go and grab. So thinking about as above, so below, and that ability for the soil to turn those, the organic matter into nutrients is going to be outpaced if it's too small. Okay, so something to remember there. But with our crop rotation, we can think about, okay, if I've just pulled out a heavy feeder, tomatoes, for example, okay, I should throw something in there that's not so heavy. Another thing, for example, is with our corn, generally the root system of the corn can kind of be on the top of the soil, even though it's quite strong, okay? That can also lead to the fact that there's no roots being sent down into the soil. Something that cover crop does really, really well is help break up that soil. But we want something that's then going to send its roots downwards, break apart that soil, allow for the moisture to be drawn down into the soil as well, okay? What's really good at that? our root vegetables or our carrots. Man, I struggle with carrots. I'm going to steal your recipe. We're talking about plant diversity here as well, okay? I had Phil Dudman on my podcast, a lovely gentleman, and he was talking about how in his garden, he just has things kind of everywhere. And he might pull something out, harvest it, and go, oh, there's a little space there, maybe I can throw something else in there, okay? And that works incredibly well for him because there's diversity everywhere. And as we mentioned before about confusing pests, having our herbs, our flowers interplanted with our vegetables really, really helps, okay? We just touched on this, interplanting and polycropping. All right, so this is a much better and more effective way of having easier pest management than if we had one garden bed of this, one garden bed of that, blah, 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 okay? Us as humans, we want to be super organized. We want to, okay, potatoes are going in that bed, and then my strawberries are going in that one there, okay? We just want to have it nicely labeled, and we want to know how to treat each thing. But what that's doing is it's making it a little bit more difficult for ourselves, okay? We're not actually working with nature, which is so diverse by nature, okay? We're working against that, and we're saying, no, I know better. I'm going to put everything in this bed and everything in this bed, and it's going to work just fine, okay? It can work just fine, but it takes a lot more work than if we're interplanting or polycropping, okay? And there's a good example in the picture there. You can see a whole bunch of flowers in there as well, okay? I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of the dot points, but we'll talk about the concept. Now, here's an example, okay? This lovely lady has 4 planter boxes that she's got here. For this example, we're going to imagine that all of these planter boxes have a bottom to them, or that she's put some weed matting down or something like that, which generally does happen in these kinds of setups. But as you can see, okay, I think she's got kale in one. I think it might be sweet potatoes down the back, and then a sort of an onion, a garlic, or chive, or something at the front there. Now, this is what I'm talking about having something that's one crop in one bed, okay? This is a target for our pests, because if the soil health isn't what it needs to be, you're going to lose everything, okay? You're going to lose it all at once, bang, and it's gone, because all of it is in the same soil, all of it is sending out the same signal, and it's a huge buffet for them to come in. And as we know, they can decimate it overnight. You know, you blink, you go away for the weekend, you have a busy week like I've had this week, and it's all gone out the window. Weeks of hard work, okay? And that's so hard. So something we all share in that one. Second example, okay? This one's in the ground. Obviously, we can see that there's going to be a much bigger soil battery, okay? There's going to be a lot less room for the plants to be unhealthy. We also have some sort of interplanting because they're kind of row, nice and close to each other. And if you kind of look down on the garden, you would sort of see a bit of everything. But still, we've got these beautiful rows that are screening out saying, if I'm unhealthy, I'm going to be completely wiped out. All right? Last example. This is something closer to what we'd like to try and achieve. Okay, this is also what Phil was talking about on the podcast, sharing at his garden. He might have something that looks, so I should point here, looks a little bit like this, okay? So you've got the flowers in there, I think they're marigolds, right? They're going to be bringing in the pollinators, which can help pollinate some of the plants. But say we harvested, whether they're cabbages or cauliflower or whatever they are there. If they were harvested, we can just throw something else in there as well, okay? Something different, maybe. That's the idea. And just go, oh, there's a little bit of space. We can throw something in there and then harvest it. So all over your garden, you might have a cabbage here, a broccoli there, a blah, 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 and tomatoes, and a little bit of everything. So if these pests do come in, they're not seeing this full row of absolutely everything that they want, and they can just come in and wipe it out start to finish, okay? They're kind of going, oh, there was a little bit over there, and then so we'll go and attack that, and then your other crops disguise nicely over on the other side of the garden, okay? Gives us the ability to actually harvest something all the time. it can be really disheartening if you've worked hard on growing something the whole time and then it's all gone and you've got nothing to show for your hard work, okay? Especially if you're filming the whole thing and putting it up online, that's really embarrassing. All right, so those are our cultural controls, okay? IPM pyramid, we're moving up again. As I said, this relates to lawn, whatever they're talking about there. So the next one is our mechanical and physical controls. So that's us coming in, all right? The first part was making sure nature has got everything it needs, mulch, amendments, blah, blah, blah. 15 left? Yep. My goodness. Okay. Come on, Jordan, let's go. All right, physical controls. That's the first time I've been time reminded. We might be here till dinner time, guys, if I keep going like this. All right. Mechanical controls. Okay, we can see a couple here. Sticky traps. We're coming along hand picking with ourselves, all right? Pruning things, really, really important. Covering things, mulching, okay? Weeding. These are all mechanical controls. The good thing about going around in the garden every day, doing some watering, going and hand picking and doing these checks is that you get to see your plants every day. You get to understand what's happening. You can take the time to see what pollinators are around, what bugs are around, okay? And we get to really understand what is actually going on, okay? This guy's obviously really interested in his plants there. Pruning and deadheading, that's a pretty simple one, okay? So when we've got dead material that's still on the plant, it might cause fungal issues, might cause disease, things like this. So what do? Snip it right off, throw it back underneath into our mulch layer, okay? So that makes sure that we're using it, but we're not giving room for disease. Physical barriers, okay, we've spoken about this. My nemesis, the possum, has now got a few different layers of barriers to try and get through. So when you're trying to work and battle some of these things, physical barriers and traps can be really, really useful, all right? Next one. So that was mechanical controls. Nice and simple. It's really, really easy. We can use some of these things. Okay, you don't necessarily want yellow sticky traps all throughout your garden because they can, your bees can get stuck to that or something. But it's useful for indoors, maybe if you've got some, certain flying around bugs, we've got drain flies and things like that. Really, really useful, but they are a little bit unsightly. Next is our biological controls, okay? When we're talking biologicals, we're talking beneficials, our beneficial insects, all right? We've got 3 beneficial insects here on the screen, okay? No prizes for the first 2, but can anyone give me what that last one is? I presume this side. It's a bit hard to see, okay. I'll give you what it is. It is a soil mite, okay? Soil mites, we're often like a little bit distressed if you pull the soil back and you see all of these things crawling around. You go, like there's bugs everywhere. They're going to be, jumping up on my plant and things like this. And actually, we need a whole lot of those. And as we spoke about before, balancing out our populations is super important. A few examples there of some predatory mites, parasitic wasps, praying mantises, all of these things. If we're seeing them in the garden, that's a really, really good sign, okay? But how do we bring these into the garden? How do we attract them into the garden, okay? We need a food source and we need a water source. The most obvious one is flowers, okay? We just put flowers into the garden and bees and pollinators and things come in, okay? But we also need water source. Okay, maybe leaving a dish or a little bowl or something for them to have some water is also really, really useful because, like all of us, we need food and water, okay? And as it says there, for pest population, some beneficials do rely on pests. So you need some form of the pest, some aphids, to bring in the ladybugs, for example. So if you are seeing some aphids, that's okay, as long as they're not going completely berserk, all right? Shelter and nesting, that one's pretty obvious as well. We can use insect hotels, flowers, cover crop, just debris, even just stuff like our leaf litter layer provides a home for a lot of these as well. Okay, avoiding harmful chemicals, that's pretty obvious. That's what the whole thing is about here. And companion planting as well and trap planting, as we spoke about before, having a home for some of these pests that isn't on our main crops that can bring in our beneficials is also a good thing as well. Microbial and fungal controls, all right? So there's some other things that we can use, especially specifically talking about our caterpillars at the moment, okay? You may have heard of, I'm going to butcher this, bacteria thermogenesis, BT, or dipel, as it's, or dipple, or however you want to say it. That's how what we find in somewhere like Bunnings, okay? Bacillus, there you go. I'm going to try and say that one. So I won't go into exactly how it works, just due to timing. But all of these things are something that we can use that are natural occurring substances that have just been turned into a bit of a product that we can then use, okay? Remember, this is getting towards the top of our pyramid, so these are becoming our last resorts. These are becoming things that if we do have an overpopulation of something and it isn't being controlled by our beneficials and the work that we're doing to improve the soil health, this is where we come in. So BT is a really good one for our caterpillars. Okay, another one is BB, okay, we say BT, BB. This one is really good as well. Again, this one's based on spores. So what's really cool about this one is that you can use it, and these spores might stay active in the soil or on the plant for a little bit longer and can have that continued effect, I guess, to control some of these pests, all right? Mycorrhizal fungus, we spoke about that before. Trichoderma is another one as well. Building that relationship at the plant root, really, really important. We can use some of these things to help prevent the pest because we've got a better relationship in the soil. Right, last one, okay, chemical controls. I'm going to skip through a whole bunch of these relatively quickly. Again, this PowerPoint I have used before in a much, much slower way, so you can see it online if you want to go and screenshot some of the things or take some of the recipes that are on here, okay? But this is our final last step, last resort, okay? This is where we bring in some of our organic pest sprays. Now, the first one I've put on here is neem, okay? Either you're in the neem camp or you're not in the neem camp, okay? Now, from my research and understanding, as one humble man's opinion, there are great things about neem, but there also can be not so great things about neem. So I include it because I am in the neem camp. I like to use it, all right? They often say that if you're using neem on your edible vegetables, that you need to wait 2 months or something like this before you can use it, to allow some of that neem to dissipate, to come off the plant, and to not affect us, all right? But the way I see it, again, just one man's humble opinion, is that it is a natural occurring product, okay? Yes, we can have some harm to it if we're ingesting a lot of neem. But the point is, these are last resorts. These are something we're just going to do a little bit of every now and then. So if you're aware of what you've sprayed neem on, you're not just going to go and munch on an apple that's coated in neem, all right? You might wash it first, hopefully, okay? So you can use these things, and they are super effective. I also have neem cake or a neem seed meal in our organic mix, okay? That's super good for our soil to be getting in there and getting some of those effects of not only the nutrition, but the pest and disease prevention as well. Okay, so neem is one to maybe do some further research if you're thinking about that. But every spray that I use insecticidal soap or Castile soap, okay? You may have, like, old traditional methods use some form of dish soap, but Castile soap is a lot softer, it's a lot more beneficial to use, and you only need the tiniest little drop to help everything stick to those leaves and get us what we need, okay? There are some cautions about some things can be a little bit more sensitive to some of these things, so we do need to always spot test a little bit first. It can often be tricky if you've got time constraints to just go, oh, I just want to spray the whole thing and just get rid of these pests, but it is good to try and check these things out first. So insecticidal soap is a good one. Essential oils, right? Another one that we have access to quite prevalently and are super potent, very, very strong, okay? Now, I'll quickly skip to this one here. You may be able to see from there, it might be quite small. These are a whole bunch of some of the oils and what they can do and some of the other benefits that you can get from these essential oils. But essentially, the scent is confusing them, Okay, that's the point. It's an overpowering scent. So you might spray some peppermint on your broccoli, for example, just a random example, and the pest comes along and goes, that doesn't smell like broccoli, okay? So they'll leave it alone, all right? But what's really, really important to remember is that these pests also have what's called genetic memory, okay? So, for example, if you sprayed your broccoli with peppermint, okay, and you had either already some larvae or some eggs that had been laid on that plant, okay, or the mother decides to come in and land on that plant even though it does smell like peppermint, and it finds out, yum, that was delicious, okay? Whatever that peppermint smell was wicked, okay? Now their babies that come out have that genetic memory that peppermint means delicious, okay? So just like, you know, we have genetic memory we inherit from our parents and et cetera, and the things that we've done, this is exactly the same with our pests. So that's the reason why, again, we diversify and we might switch between different essential oils, either each season or for different reasons or for different crops. Okay? So another really cool one to be using. Chili and garlic, not a huge fan because, like, even though it is a really, really good one because it is so prevalent, so easy to make, easy to use, personally, I haven't found a huge impact from using chili and garlic, but mainly for the same reason that I was just talking about before with the scent. Okay, yes, it confuses them the first time, but once they've bypassed that and they realize that that smell is also a good thing, they will come in and decimate your chili and garlic sprayed things, okay? Diatomaceous earth. Have we heard of diatomaceous earth? Okay, really good for us as well, actually. But this one's really good. Can be quite messy. You can sprinkle it on top of the soil if you have an overpopulation of soil mites or things like this, okay? But it's really good as well against our ants, slugs, snails, caterpillars, some of those crawling things that will come up over the soil and up the plant stem and into the plant, okay? So a really cool one to use as well. Milk spray, okay? One thing that I do like to mention about milk spray, the quality of the milk matters a lot, okay? If you go and get soy or oat milk from the shop, that's not going to work, okay? What we want in that milk and what works in that milk is the bacteria, the enzymes, okay? So as close as you can get it to coming out of the cow or the goat or whatever it is that you're milking, the better, okay? So that really, really does matter. So just going down to Coles or Woolies and just grabbing one off the shelf might not be as effective as if you source down some raw milk, some unpasteurized, unhomogenized, etc. milk, okay? So one to remember. But really, really good. Can be great for our powdery mildew, black spot that we might find on some of our pawpaws, things like this at the moment. Baking soda, another one that's very, very prevalent. Good, again, for powdery mildew, black spot, and rust and things you might find on your French pony, something like that. So another one, super cheap, super available. Copper, okay. We can get copper sprays to help deal with some of these rusts and things as well. Be super careful with copper, okay? Even though it's a naturally occurring element, we don't want to overload our system with anything, really, but primarily some things that are trace minerals or trace elements, some things that you're not going to find a huge amount in the soil. We don't want to just go and add a whole bunch of it. So use it sparingly. Try other things maybe if you can, but it is a really good one as well. Here is my special recipe, okay? This is something that I just go to every now and then, all right? I've said on here every 2 weeks alternating, okay? That's actually very generous. And if I'm doing that, I'll probably pull it back in terms of the dilution, all right? But I'm using neem oil, sometimes eco oil. It's something that hasn't been mentioned, okay? It can be useful. Not the biggest fan of it, but it's so cheap and available, it's good to use, okay? Organic Castile soap, I've mentioned Dr. Bronner's there. You might have found some of those in the shops, health food shops. They've often got peppermint or some other little scent in there as well, which can help. And then 1 drop maybe of essential oil per 1.5 liters. Super strong, these essential oils, so minimal is best, okay? But when I wrote this PowerPoint a fair while ago, I was using it every 2 weeks, but I've found that that was probably a little bit too much. So we're trying to pull back. We're trying to work on this, the ability of you know, healthy soil first and foremost. Yes?
Which essential oil are you talking about?
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll go quickly back. So I use peppermint, tea tree, citronella for the mosquitoes, thyme, and clove. Those are my favorites. Okay, but you can use it. You can use anything. I'm rotating is the most important thing. Each time I'm doing it, it's a different essential oil. Even if it's every 2 weeks, it's a different essential oil because we want these overall benefits. Okay. So that was our IPM pyramid. Okay, remembering that we're starting down the bottom and coming up. Final takeaways from this. Okay, this is the things that I want to really reiterate. As we spoke about at the start, it's healthy soil. It's diverse soil. Okay, that's the most important thing that we're trying to achieve here. We're feeding the soil. We're growing soil, not plants. All right, the soil is the key to all of this. Then it makes all of our lives so much easier when it comes to the pest management and prevention and things like this, okay? So that's probably the best one. Balanced ecosystems naturally control pests, and intervention is available only when we need it, okay? We've spoken about a few of these examples. Sometimes I like to ask people what has worked for them, but we've spoken about a few of those examples, so we might leave that one for today. But any questions that's burning in your mind, please feel free to come up afterwards and chat to me. I'll hang around for a bit and we'll chat. But any questions that might help out the group or anything like that? No? Beautiful. Yes, Carol?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Root knot nematodes.
Nematodes?
Yeah. I've done a molasses and
Oh,
spray
cool.
just on the soil. Very Colby Williams showed it.
Yes,
Spraying the foliage of the plants, but I've just done it on the soil.
Bit of a soil drench and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, I've had the problem for years. And I just want to get rid of them once and for all if we've got any other advice.
Look,
Very comprehensive.
yes, that is a really important, that's a really important one to remember. I think, as I said before, when it goes for all of these different individual case circumstances, okay, we're trying to look about balancing out what might eat them or what might be something that is, like you said, planting marigolds, which might actually stop them from multiplying or overpopulating, essentially, okay? Because we don't want to have to come in all the time and spray them and keep the population down. That is something that I'll go and sort of maybe do some more research on for you because I want to really understand that myself to kind of give you a direct answer. But generally, a kind of a bit of cop-out answer is this diversity idea where we're trying to kind of build the balance in for everything. So if I ever have an overpopulation of anything, okay, first and foremost, I'm going in and figuring out, okay, what actually do I need in there that's going to help control it for me, do the work for me. In the same reason why I use my chickens to turn my compost, because I don't want to ruin my back, all right? We want to use natural things to do the work for us. So if I'm, in your case, Carol, I would probably, like myself, I'm going to go away and do a little bit more research on that so I can give you a bit more straight answer. But when it comes to anything in particular, that's what I'm trying to kind of work out, okay, what is something that I can bring in. There's also a wonderful website called Bugs for Bugs. Has anyone heard of that before? Look it up, another one, write it down. Bugs for Bugs, you can go and buy your beneficials, you can go and buy parasitic wasps, you can go and buy things to come and introduce into your garden and introduce populations, especially for those I've found that are in much more residential areas where we don't have wild areas like this nearby. So it can be really helpful to go and grab those, maybe introduce them, throw them on the soil into your plants and see where we go from there. Any last questions? Guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate you listening to me ramble on. Hopefully I didn't go too much over time, Tim. But yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate you. Thank you.